Mikel Arteta is so box office at this point that we want to see his games purely based on some of the matchups that his team and his, I want to say staff, but also players obviously have matched up against with the heavyweight boys. Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, now Mauricio Pochettino, and soon I'd imagine Manchester United and lots of other teams as well. The matchups that Mikel Arteta is capable of creating and some of the tactical breakdowns that we can come out with and some of the brilliance that we can come away with is really interesting to watch this season. And we're entering a new phase of Mikel Arteta's managerial career. A managerial career which is still, by the way, relatively young. But because we've seen him now for a number of years and we feel relatively familiar with him, I feel like we normalise a lot of what Mikel Arteta is really good at, but also a lot of what Arsenal are kind of known with for him. And in this Chelsea game, there are some perfect distillations of those things. Welcome back to the Laurence McKenna channel. It's good to have you guys. 2-2 in the end at Stamford Bridge, and there's plenty we can take from that. Obviously, the history between Mauricio Pochettino and Mikel Arteta was very much played up before this game, partially because it was difficult to work out how the two managers were going to line up against each other, and so the interesting talking point was obviously the personal history at PSG between the two of them. They were friends at one point. They were roomies, if you like, and, you know, there's something quite nice about that. The idea that both these managers are kind of, you know, friends, compatriots at one point, and now they go head to head is your classic football narrative. What most people didn't see coming, and what a lot of people underestimated about Chelsea, was that once Mauricio Pochettino gets his ideas drilled into them, then he's going to become a lot more difficult to face. And this was probably one of the first games where we saw that truly come to fruition. And it was possible that Mikel Arteta was just unfortunate in terms of the fixture list. Or maybe he was fortunate because Mauricio Pochettino wasn't further down the line. But this is where I'm talking about the first kind of familiarity that we have with Mikel Arteta. There are some games where he's not gambled, but he's kind of setting up his team in a very specific way. And that's possibly because we're looking at players in terms of their fitness, we're looking at players in terms of whether they've just come back from international duty, we're looking at players in terms of fit, we're looking at how all the different pieces fit together at any one point. But if you start that back line in the way that Mikel Arteta did, it kind of begins to set the rest of the team up. Zinchenko on that far left side means that your midfield's going to operate in a very specific way. If you put Ben White on the right side, the midfield's going to operate in a very specific way. And they have, to an extent, been limited this season because they haven't had Jurrien Timber in there, obviously due to injury, and they probably won't have him for a little while as well. So the progression of Mikel Arteta has been stunted somewhat, not that those players aren't good. But we saw early on the exploitation of everything that Arteta knows is a weakness within his team. Bypass that midfield, get wide, attack into those spaces that are often left by the Arsenal team, and you're going to get some pleasure. But doing that through Cole Palmer, doing that through a player that they've only just signed not long ago, and almost springing that on Arsenal was a genius move from Mauricio Pochettino. But here's the thing. At the beginning of the season, Mikel Arteta said the phrase that now has been used multiple times on this channel, multiple times elsewhere, and I'm sure there are lots of other people who are misusing it in probably the way that I am, plan A1, A2, A3, 4, 5, 6, right? And that's why these Arsenal players have such trust in Mikel Arteta and where he is going in any one game. And what I mean by that is, if you're 2-0 down at any point, sometimes that can be damning. Sometimes that can be awful. Sometimes that can literally be the end of the game for you. You don't see a way back from that. But Arsenal know there are changes coming. There are phases of play that are going to change. And it was that specific run right after Mykhailo Mudryk scores, about 10-15 minutes later he gets subbed off and the game changes. His defensive actions, what he was doing, was so key to what was blocking a lot of what Arsenal was doing and what was happening with Sterling on the other side, that when I then read you this little sequence that happens after that, right, which goes, Nicholas Jackson comes on, formation changes, shape changes. Not long after that, in fact 2 minutes later after that, Eddie Nketiah and Emile Smith-Rowe come on, changing out Jorginho and Gabriel Jesus. Two players who arguably are fantastic players, right? But at the same time, also weren't particularly effective in this game. In come two effective players. Emile Smith-Rowe through the centre, where he's able to attack and effectively jam up a little bit more of what Chelsea are doing, and Eddie Nketiah. Someone who came in and his movement, but also just that, I guess him just getting involved in that front line a little bit more and probably just pushing on a little bit more than Gabriel Jesus was capable of changed things. You saw not long after that, Marc Cucurella gets his card because of the pressure that Arsenal are putting on Chelsea. And not long after that, Declan Rice and the pressure, the push down the field that Arsenal get is rewarded. Now, you can't expect a goalkeeper always to make a mistake like that, but also let's speak about modern football in general. Managers are anticipating you reacting to the way that they play. So before it was much more like you set out your 4-4-2, we'll set out our 4-4-2. Sometimes there'll be some matchups, but broadly, the players are going to work this out and the quality will come through. Whether that was always true, I don't know. But broadly, that was the narrative, right? Now it's much more, if we press, that's going to influence how you pass. If you lollygag, if you are caught napping, if someone like Conor Gallagher is caught waiting for the ball when actually, Rice goes and intercepts it, open goal. You see what I'm saying? There are these phases that Mikel Arteta is able to unleash, and possibly also because Arsenal are so difficult to play at this point, it means that the opposition are exhausted by a certain point. They can't just continue the same high intensity that they had. So as beautiful as Caicedo is, as beautiful as Gallagher has been, and as destroying as an influence as he was, and the same goes for Enzo Fernandez and a number of other players, that after a while can become less effective. Arsenal work out what they need to do to get around it, but B, they also exhaust you. Not long after that, we saw more subs, and again, big changes. Martin Odegaard came off, on comes Kai Havertz. Someone who obviously left Chelsea earlier in the summer, was then also not possibly upstaged, I don't think, but you think, well, if he's watching Cole Palmer, he's probably thinking, why couldn't that be me? Why didn't you offer me that role in the first place? And then on comes Trossard. We know Trossard is a wanderer. We know that he kind of dominates that whole left side. He can go anywhere from getting chalk on his boots at the halfway line all the way down to the back post, and he loves getting in the mix for Arsenal. He's one of those players that when he comes on, something effective is going to happen under Mikel Arteta. Not long after that, you see some reactions. You see Madueke and Reece James come on. That is almost a reaction in the game from Mauricio Pochettino, another chess move. Not even a checkmate, but at this point, I think he sees that there is kind of a bit of a check going on here. Not long after that, in fact, just exactly the same minute almost, Leandro Trossard scores. Brilliant assist from Bukayo Saka. Back post, there he is. Goalkeeper is left in no man's land, and the ball just comes back across him. Into the net it goes, and Arsenal are on the front foot. Why they didn't up the pressure just a little bit, and how Chelsea relieved the pressure just a little bit by sitting back, allowing Arsenal to come onto them, and then counter-attacking, worked really well. Not long after that, Eddie Nketiah then had some more chances. Eddie Nketiah, I feel like he was so key in this game. It made it was such a massive impact on him. And from him that I thought, oh wow, I know that a lot of people are talking about Mikel Arteta needing another big man, needing someone else to influence that front line. You can see why he trusted in Eddie Nketiah, but also you can see why there are possibly some questions. I get it, in the past week, they've actually seeded that they won't be buying anyone in January. They won't be going for an Ivan Toney. They won't be going for, whichever other big European striker there is. And you could see the faith that he had in someone like Nketiah at this point. The same goes for Emile Smith-Rowe. There are players that I think are underestimated within this Arsenal team right now, where it's like their influence has probably been negated or minimised because initially there was this starting 11 that everyone fell in love with. But what was interesting was I saw last week this graphic, right, of players that have been most effective in the modern Arsenal era, and I think it was just under Mikel Arteta. The two of the positions, which were kind of not the Mikel Arteta current team, were the Martinelli side, which I think was Lacazette or something like that. And then maybe they were trying to shoehorn him in. But the other one was, I think, in the midfield on maybe the Granit Xhaka side or something like that. And it showed maybe Martinelli can have a bit more influence on this side. Maybe he is minimised because other players are maximised. But the same goes for an Emile Smith-Rowe. The same goes for an Nketiah. These guys are really good quality players who add real depth to the team and can do something really meaningful for Mikel Arteta. Don't always get that starting berth, right? After post-international games, having depth in your squad, being able to rotate the team, knowing that you have a game on Tuesday or a game on Wednesday in the Champions League, the week after a cup game, the weekend after that, it just keeps going and going and going. Mikel Arteta will know this. But what's amazing about that is, and what a lot of managers have worked out, is these units that they can put out, in the same way as Mikel Arteta put out, can influence games to such a degree that you're almost hitting the reset button when you bring them on. You're almost going, okay, you've got 45 minutes now or 35, whatever it is, in a whole different shape. To go out there, you've read the game, you're fresh, you can run at these players who are less fresh, they're exhausted. I'm going to just give you the opportunity to be you. With exactly and very specific tactical instructions. And that's where it worked really well for for Mauricio Pochettino, and then Mikel Arteta flipped it back, and you get that feeling that at this point, Mauricio Pochettino hasn't quite had the time with the players to be able to go, okay, you can react to this phase of play, you're tired here, try this. He wasn't quite at that briefing level. There had been this brilliant briefing to bring them wide, cut inside, and that was obviously shown on the heat maps, right? But Sterling was getting a lot of joy. I don't know if Mudryk meant that cross. And I think that brings me on to the next point here. When you cut in and you negate those fullbacks, what you then need is a goalkeeper that you trust, because that space has to be, well, first of all, you have to have that triangle of the three defenders, which is sometimes can be a bit skewed this way, a bit skewed that way, depending on who's your lead defender, or kind of the one who's deepest and therefore the one that's able to read the game in the same way as the goalkeeper. I get it. Like, I understand there is that frustration, should we say, around Ramsdale or Raya. I think it shows the ruthlessness of Mikel Arteta, though not today, obviously, because the Ramsdale has had the family issue, whatever's going on with him. And not that that's necessarily negative. I think, if congratulations are in order for Raya in this game, it's because it's not about him trumping Ramsdale or something like that. It's about him in very specific moments showing why they want him. There is great distribution there. There is really good command of his around that. It's not even the 6-yard box. It's kind of that 6 yard to the penalty spot area. Comes out, claims the ball. With what Chelsea were trying to achieve, that was made probably a bit easier for Raya. But I get the feeling he's the long-term choice, right? With that, I feel like the criticism of him and for the Mudryk goal is probably unfair. If it's a deliberate strike, it's a brilliant strike from Mudryk. If it's a mistake or if it's something you didn't quite mean, I don't know if you can really legislate for that on Raya's part. On the other side of that, I also get that the first goal was like, I can't say it was Raya's fault, but it wasn't. It was more of a Chelsea being good than Arsenal being poor, right? But that back line at the moment, they have world quality centre backs. They have world quality. They have world-class centre-backs, right? There are times when Zinchenko or Ben White or Tomiyasu, that's why I think they brought Tomiyasu on later. I felt like, again, Tomiyasu's been so influential, been so great this season. It's great to see him out there and kind of almost being like a wonder, almost like an Andy Robertson type role where he can aggressively get into the game, aggressively push the opposition back, give them something else to think about, not just thinking about running at a left back or running into space. You're worried Tomiyasu's on you. You're worried there's someone coming into the side of you. You're worried there's someone who's going to be behind you. You're always worried about the physicality of him, whatever side it is that he plays on. That's again down to Mikel Arteta basically coaching these guys up. When Tomiyasu first came in, the rumours were it was like, hey, this guy, no one wanted him in the Premier League. They're sort of buying him blind, which is bizarre, but also, clearly not. Like, that's a bizarre thing to do for a Premier League club in the first place. It's not that we're talking like do you remember that player that was kind of came in as someone else's cousin? Might have been George Weah's cousin or someone like that. And, they basically just took him on and paid him a wage, and then they found out he wasn't a footballer. That wasn't the case with Tomiyasu. People were acting as if that was the case with him at the start of the season, end of the summer, when he did first come in, right? I feel like, again, though, the frustration, and I'll put it later in the video because I get people get angry in this Arsenal community if you're not an Arsenal supporter and you're pointing out the issues, but I do just want to point this out. There have been some games where when it doesn't quite go right for Mikel Arteta early on, you see there is faith from the players, but there weren't quite enough changes. Sometimes the changes came a little bit too late. Like, this was a game where it didn't feel like 2 points dropped, but it did feel like not 3 points gained. And I get it, they're top of the table alongside City, but they could be ahead of City right now had they won this one. This is a Chelsea team who couldn't get any higher than 8th, no matter the amount of points that they got this evening, right? So that's the frustration with this Mikel Arteta thing. It's like, realistically, are we really expecting that Arsenal couldn't have won this game away at Stamford Bridge? Like, they hadn't had a great history in the first place. There was this need for Arsenal to win. I get that, Mauricio Pochettino is changing things around, but I think there'll be frustration there. I think what it does show is without Partey as an option, without Xhaka as an option, without someone in the midfield to be more of an enforcer, if you shut down Odegaard and, maybe you can shut down Rice or someone like that, I think you get to a point where Arsenal is shut down. Not because, I'm not saying that the players aren't good, but there is the tactical possibility to shut those players down and make real trouble for them because you've negated so much of what they do so well. And there are times where I wish they weren't looking to the manager and going, when is this change coming? And the changes were more active on the field. And that feels like the next stage here for Arsenal. In-game management, which is something that Odegaard has been very good at. And, a lot of the tactics go through him, and a lot of the good pushing, a lot of pressing, and a lot of the offensive action goes through him. And I think he's like the player with the most offensive actions in the Premier League. But the next one is game management. And at the moment, I get it, like Rice was very much managing the game when he pounced on Gallagher and pushed down. But sometimes you feel like you look at it and you go, okay, if you want to compete with City, look at the way they morph, look at the way they manage the game, look at the way that they are constantly shifting things around. What else can they do to match the level of City? And how can they get up to that? I'm not saying they have to ape them or do the same thing, but I'm saying how can they match and get up there? Because it will feel frustrating for Mikel Arteta and these players today. Anyway, I'm slightly out of focus there. Anyway, really nice to chat to you guys. Hope you're having a good day. I appreciate you watching the channel. If you haven't already subscribed, hit subscribe. And if you want to hear a little bit more about Arsenal more regularly, let me know in the comments below. I'm making a Liverpool-specific channel. If you're a Liverpool fan, you're watching this and you watch to this point, fantastic. If you want to know more about Liverpool, I'm going to make a Liverpool-specific channel this week, purely based on the fact that I want to upload more Liverpool content, but I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in a little while. Much love.